Paranormal Buzz Radio is proud to present Girls vs. Ghost Media's Spoopy Talk with Madison Smith from Madison Paranormal. You can find Spoopy Talk every other Sunday, 6 Eastern, 5 Central, right here, live on Paranormal Buzz Radio. Be sure to join in the live interactive chat by going to Spreaker.com or downloading the Spreaker app for all devices.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of Paranormal Buzz Radio or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is strictly prohibited. For information on everything Paranormal Buzz Radio has to offer, visit our website, paranormalbuzzradio.com. Like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter and Instagram. Listener discretion is advised.
Ladies and gentlemen, here's your host, Madison Smith.
Hi everyone, I'm Madison Smith, and I would like to welcome you all to Spoopy Talk with Maddie. Tonight's guest is someone I have not had the pleasure to meet yet, but is someone I am hoping to meet in the future. And You would like to... Okay. You would know him as one of the lead investigators of Ghost Hunters. I would love to give a very spoopy welcome to Brandon Alvis.
Hey, thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
No problem. So how are you?
Doing very well. Doing my best during this pandemic and with the quarantine. So just been at home, staying safe and healthy, and just following along with the new season of Ghost Hunters. So it's been nice to actually be home and able to see the episodes airing. Last time in season 1, we were on the road, so we really didn't get to see it air. So it's been a nice change of pace.
Yeah. All right. And then just to forewarn you, anybody in the comments, for some reason my phone and my Wi-Fi is acting up, so I am using my personal hotspot on my phone. So if the podcast starts to go haywire, that's the reason why. Terribly sorry for the inconvenience. So, anywho, we shall start the questions, and if anybody in the comments does have any questions, go ahead, post them, and I'll read them. Alright. So, how long have you been investigating, and when did you first figure out you wanted to investigate?
Well, I'm actually going on my 16th year of active field investigating, field research, but my interest in the paranormal, started at a young age. 1995, I lost my oldest brother to cancer, and in 2004, I lost another brother to suicide. So that kind of sent me into my journey into the paranormal and trying to find evidence of a possible existence of a life after death. And before I ever actually set foot in the field, I read as many books as I could about the paranormal, everything from psychic phenomena to scientific investigation. And my goal has always been to go out there and try to find some kind of proof or try and find some kind of evidence that there is a life after death. So it wasn't really about having a paranormal experience per se. It was more about the losses of my brothers and looking at the idea of life after death.
Yeah. And when was your first experience?
Oh, that would probably have to be probably my first year of investigating the paranormal, when I actually went out and started actively field investigating. I would always reach out to historical societies. I never really did a lot of homeowner cases back then, not because I didn't want to help people. I've done those in the past as well, but I always wanted to go to locations that I thought had a history associated with it that would lead to what I always called the formula of a haunting. And so I would go to these locations and reach out to historical societies and museums and all these locations throughout the country and see if there was a correlation between certain historical events as well with the paranormal. And so I would go out, and I'd have to say probably one of my first experiences would be at a location in my hometown of Bakersfield, California. It was an old abandoned farmhouse, and they claimed to have a lot of paranormal activity. They said they would see a little girl in this location, not only see her, but hear her. And I went in and recorded EVP with a condenser microphone to an interface to a computer, and left the condenser microphone by itself in the location. And I was kind of doing remote EVP sessions where I would be outside listening on headphones in real time to the room. And I actually heard this little girl's voice that they claimed to be haunting this location. So that would probably have to be one of my first experiences that really, got me addicted to this field and kept me going for all the years I've been doing this.
All right. And do you have any advice for anybody who's listening?
Absolutely. When it comes to investigating the paranormal, the first thing I would always say is that if you're going to go out there and conduct active field investigations, say homeowner cases, or even going out there to famous historical haunts, always figure out exactly what your protocol or your methodology is going to be before you step foot in the field. Really figure out why you're conducting the research and how you're going to do that. And I think if you have that goal and that mindset ready to go, I think it's going to go a lot further with your research than just kind of going out there and trying to figure it out on the fly.
All right. And going back to the last question, can you tell me do you know any history of that place with the little girl and everything?
Yeah, I do. What's really interesting about that place is it's kind of actually shrouded in mystery. There's a lot of holes in the history with that location, but we did find death records of a little girl that passed away, unfortunately, on the property. And she was actually, she was killed, they say. They say she was possibly murdered, but her body was found on the property. And they're not really sure. Some speculated it to be murder. Some say it was natural causes. So there's that big shroud of mystery over this location. So that's part of it. We go in, we look into the eyewitness testimony, we have that experience, but the next step would be to try and find tangible proof of there being a death on the property, which we were able to actually find, which is really interesting.
All right. And how many times have you been back to that place?
I only investigated a few times. Unfortunately now that building has been demolished. It's been demolished for well over 10 years now. And it's actually now what they use during the holidays is a Christmas tree farm, which is interesting. But I would be interested to see if there was still some kind of activity taking place, even though the building's not there.
Well, it could be, or maybe they just moved on, or maybe they just found a different home. Who knows?
Exactly.
And then one of the questions in the chat from Shay, does he take precautions or use protection during investigations?
Absolutely. Everyone has their own belief system when they go into these investigations, and everyone has their own different ideas when it comes to protection and how you're going to protect yourself in these investigations. And over the years, I've developed my own sense of protection, my own ideas, my own ideology when it comes to making sure I don't leave with anything else than I came with at the investigation. So, and yeah, absolutely. I have my own beliefs and my own protection that I use, and I use it every investigation, especially here on this new season of Ghost Hunters that everyone's seen. We have been to some amazing isolated locations with a lot of very intense activity, actually. So it's definitely something you have to take into a thought process and make sure you're protecting yourself properly.
Yeah, and it's very important to protect yourself because you don't want to end up, possessed or anything, if you know what I mean. So, I would not like to be possessed. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. Doesn't sound good.
Exactly. I would rather be home alone for, 12 days straight, which this is kind of close enough. So, hey, I'm prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's good training, right?
And all right. Well, I do have dogs here, so I guess it's okay, Now, from Matt. Ugh. I just had a freaking brain fart. Jesus. Okay. Back to the show. Jeez. All right. Now, from Frat? Okay. Matt Wendell. Or Waddell. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. All right. What's his favorite location to investigate, and what's his least favorite?
Ooh, favorite. That's a tough question. Such a tough question. I've been to over 200 locations, conducted well over 200 investigations. I'd have to say one of my favorites that I've actually investigated is going to be on this Wednesday's episode of Ghost Hunters. Wednesday at 9 p.m. on A&E, you're going to see a place that's called the Galena Marine Hospital. It's a hospital built in the 1850s to treat sailors that were on steamboats going down the rivers at that time. And this location not only is probably one of the spookiest places I've ever investigated, but it looks like it was literally dropped in the middle of the woods, which makes it even more strange because it's a hospital. They were serving these sailors that were, becoming ill or hurt on these steamboats, but it was so out of the way. It's a strange place to look at. So I'd have to say that's probably one of my favorite locations I've investigated in a long time. But when it comes to saying that there's a worse place to investigate, I would never say that there's a negative side to investigating the paranormal, because if you go to a location and you don't collect any evidence or any data associated with the haunting, it's still a win because you're still collecting data and you're learning from that experience. And you're learning that, hey, look, this is what I can do better on the next investigation. This is more information I can use going further. So I think that can't really say there's a location I didn't like.
Yeah. And that's the same thing for me. Like, I don't really have a least favorite place. Like, I have my favorites, but the rest of them are kind of on the same level. So, yeah.
Right, absolutely. It's tough. It's tough to make that determination as far as what's your favorite location, because each one's special in its own way.
Exactly. All right. Now from Shay in the comments, what's the craziest thing that's ever happened on an investigation?
Oh, man. From an evidence standpoint, I'd have to say this new season of Ghost Hunters, we had Fort Stanton investigation that we did in New Mexico. And we started implementing this new device called an electron multiplying camera that's used to record photon events by the digital imaging scientific community. And we utilized this device. We took it out in the field and we collected what many would consider the holy grail in paranormal research, which is a full body apparition. And something that sticks with me to this day, something that's actually we look at. That footage is still being reviewed and looked at by our consultants, not only in the scientific community, engineers, people that really have an understanding of how this technology works. And we have yet to come to a conclusion, and therefore leaving it to be paranormal.
All right. Now, talking about locations, do you have any that you would like to go to and have not been there yet?
Oh, absolutely. There's always one location that sticks out in my mind that I think would be a great place to investigate, and that would be the Tower of London. I think you have this history associated with it that would be a prime location for what I always refer to as a formula of a haunting. And that's something I've been working on for a number of years, is trying to take research a step further and really look at the idea that there are certain events that lead to a haunting, not only from a historical perspective, but from an environmental perspective. Going out there and trying to collect factual data and really getting environmental conditions as well as other scientific data to support that there are things out there that we can't explain. And I think that the Tower of London would be a perfect location to try that.
Yeah. Same with the White House because of Abraham Lincoln and all that. Like, that would be a really cool place.
Oh, yeah. So there's a really great story about Winston Churchill actually seeing what he said was the ghost of Abraham Lincoln in the Lincoln bedroom. And that's a really famous story. So there's been a lot of very credible people over the years that have seen Abraham Lincoln hanging out in the White House. So that would be another good one.
Yeah. And I've heard a lot of theories about that. But my all-time favorite is... So I'm not sure if this is proven, because I honestly have the memory of a fly. Like, this was a while ago that I read this. But either way... What I've heard is Abraham Lincoln actually held seances there, and maybe that's why he came back, you know?
Right. Yep, absolutely. He was a big-time spiritualist, and he very much believed in spiritualism. And, yeah, that's true. Mary Todd Lincoln, his wife, was heavily into spiritualism as well. They had some tragic deaths in their family. Unfortunately, the Lincoln family had a lot of tragic deaths. But, yeah, seances were something that he was a part of and did conduct.
Maybe that's why he got into it, maybe. Because he just wanted to talk to everybody again that passed away, you know?
Absolutely. Yeah. Usually, that's a big precursor to getting involved in the paranormal, especially back in the 1800s and whatnot. The spiritualist movement, it was all about reaching out to ones that had passed before, loved ones in particular.
Yeah. Now, one of the biggest questions that I have about that is, did he use a Ouija board, or did he just hire somebody, like a psychic?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I doubt he would be using Ouija boards in that time, but he was probably conducting these seances with psychics or people that were spiritual advisors at that time. So that's the way I would imagine it took place.
Yeah, because when did talking boards originally come out? I literally can't remember.
That date escapes me, but I think they go back a while back. But when you start to think about the Ouija board itself and the name Ouija and all that, I think that was probably late 1800s, around the spiritualist movement. But I could be wrong. I haven't looked into that in a long time. That's a very minute detail I do not remember off the top of my head.
Same. All right. So, do you believe in Ouija boards, or do you just not like them as much?
Well, I think that using a Ouija board is no different than going into a location and using a digital audio recorder. It's all about your intentions and your way of trying to communicate. So using a piece of wood or a piece of cardboard with a planchette is no different than going into a location with an audio recorder and asking for someone to communicate with you. So I think it all comes down to the fact of the person's intention, what they're trying to do, and how they're trying to communicate, and what their intentions are. I think that's what really it comes down to.
Yeah, in my opinion, I don't think Ouija boards are bad at all. Like you said, the intentions of it, so.
Exactly, absolutely. It's all about the person's intention, and a Ouija board is no different than a piece of digital equipment. It's just all about how you're utilizing it and what you are trying to get out of it.
Yeah. So talking about the Ouija boards, so I can't remember the correct term for these type of equipment, but they're more like a physical thing, like you actually interact with it. Do you use any of them, like dowsing rods, pendulums, Ouija boards?
I do not personally use any of that in my own research. My whole idea about paranormal research for me is more on the scientific side and sticking to the scientific principle. I want factual data and empirical evidence, and those devices that people use may bring them some satisfaction into what they believe, and it helps them with their belief system. But for what I try and do with ghost hunters, as well as my own personal research outside of the show, is trying to find that empirical evidence, trying to find factual data, and really pushing this field forward to be a true science. And that's really been my goal since I've been involved, and something I strive to do every investigation.
All right. So talking about equipment, do you have any favorites that you prefer to use, or anything work?
Yeah, I would have to say this electron multiplying camera that I've been utilizing in this new season of Ghost Hunters is really changing the game when it comes to paranormal research, not only from the fact that we're collecting some true scientific data now, but we're collecting some of the best visual images that's ever been seen. And what's amazing about that is not only are we seeing these amazing images, but we know that there's a very particular matter associated with that. So beyond going into a location, collecting something we don't understand, now we have data to say, hey, look, these entities, these ghosts may be manifesting through this very particular matter, which would be photon events. And these photon events do carry electromagnetic radiation as well. So now we're breaking this down on a scientific level and really getting some big breakthroughs and really big answers.
Yeah. All right. Now in the comments, sorry guys, I've missed a lot, so is there any location he won't return to?
No, absolutely not. I'll go back to any location, especially when it comes down to helping a client. I always try and put the fear factor outside of my research. I'm always there as unbiased as possible. My job is to go into a location and observe and report. Take that evidence, take that data, analyze it, and draw conclusions from it and present that to the clients. So There's not a place I wouldn't go back to. I'm always willing to go out there, conduct more research, and really do what I can to help.
Yeah. So what advice would he give new teams, popping up to bring a more scientific approach to the field instead of screaming demons?
That's a good question. I would say, going back to what I said earlier, just to say this again, before you ever step foot in the field, read as much literature on the subject as possible. Figure out what your intentions are, how you want to conduct your research, and really have a protocol and methodology down prior to stepping foot in the field. But I will say this: if you're going to do this from a scientific principle or try and be as scientific as possible, you have to use technology that is from other industries, not pieces of tech that are made to quote unquote find ghosts. You have to utilize scientific instrumentation and instrumentation that can be looked at by a professional from a technical industry that can give you a real breakdown and a real understanding of how these devices work and what the data is you're collecting. So that would be the biggest thing. Number one, don't utilize devices that say for entertainment purposes only, and don't utilize devices that are made to try and find quote-unquote ghosts.
Yeah. So, I just had a freaking brain fart again. Jeez. Okay. Back on track. So, how did you get on the Ghost Hunter crew in, the original,
Yeah, I was actually approached by the production company, Pilgrim Films, and they were working on a paranormal show. And they had some people that wanted to meet me, and I went out and I sat with them for almost a week in Los Angeles, and had conversations with them about the paranormal and conversations about this new show that they were working on. And little did I know that it was actually Ghost Hunters, and Grant Wilson was involved, and they were bringing back the most iconic paranormal show that's ever been created. And they wanted a new version of it. They wanted to see a new generation. And it was an amazing opportunity, amazing honor to go out there and meet everybody and sit there and really talk about the paranormal. And to me, I never got involved in the paranormal to be on television. I never cared about any form of fame, recognition, anything like that. To me, it was always a very deep personal reason why I got involved in trying to find a possible existence of a life after death. And being able to be part of Ghost Hunters and having this platform has really helped propel my research and really helped me take a lot of these theories I've had for many years and implement that into the field. And now people are seeing that here in season 2.
Yeah. So, out of all the places that you visited throughout the years, what's your favorite one on the Ghost Hunter thing?
Oh, I'd have to say this new location that we'll be seeing here on Wednesday at 9 p.m. on A&E, the Galena Marine Hospital is, and I don't use the word spooky a lot. I really don't go into a location and try and find that fear factor associated with it. But I will tell you, with the Galena Marine Hospital, there was something different about that location that just kind of had everyone on edge or had everyone a bit anxious when you were in there. So I think that the Galena Marine Hospital in Galena, Illinois is really high up on my list. And I can't wait for everyone to see that here this Wednesday at 9 on A&E.
All right. Do you have any history on the place? Or no?
Absolutely. Yeah, it was built in 1857 as a hospital to serve sailors that were involved in steamboat accidents, as well as became sick on these steamboats through the riverways in America. And this place was built in the middle of Galena, in the woods. Very strange location. But a side note, Galena, Illinois is actually the hometown of Ulysses S. Grant, the former Union Army general that helped win the Civil War, but also became a president of the United States after that. So you have an amazing location that not only has this history associated with the sailors, this history associated with the Civil War, but something really, truly unexplainable going on out there. And I just can't wait for everyone to see it.
Yeah. And I can't remember, but have you been to Gettysburg and the battlefields by chance or no?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorite locations I've ever been. I think one of the first times I went to Gettysburg, it was when I was around 12 years old. My parents took me there. I'm a huge history buff. I am obsessed with history. I read anything I can get my hands on associated with history, but I truly love American history and Civil War history in particular. And I've been lucky enough to visit many of the battlefields throughout this country that were involved in conflicts of the Civil War, and I actually collect pieces of Civil War history as well, and I have some of that in my home. But yeah, I have been to Gettysburg many times. One of my favorite locations in this country.
Mm-hmm. Like, I love history, in my opinion. Like, that's my best subject in school. Like, I'm really good at it, you know. And sadly, I do not collect history, but I do collect lots of books about it. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah, absolutely. And that's one thing about the paranormal is one thing I always say is that when you investigate the paranormal, it's almost like you're reliving that history in a sense. And in some way, you possibly could be interacting with that history. So that's very exciting to me. I think that should be very exciting to a lot of people. Over the years, I've done a lot of fundraising for historical locations across the country. And a lot of these places, these historical locations, we're struggling to get people in because sometimes people just aren't interested in history, which is very sad. But when they start to talk about the paranormal side of it, they're interested. But little do they realize that when you talk about the paranormal, you're talking about the history, and you're talking about the history associated with the location. So I always say that paranormal investigation is almost like reliving history in a sense.
Honestly, I've never thought of that, but I don't even know the words. Like, that's a really, I don't have the word to this, like, you know, let's just move on. All right. So in the comments, we have 2 more questions. Sorry, I'm really bad with English.
No, that's okay. No, you're doing great. You're doing great.
Like, funny story. So, some of the viewers pointed this out. I was doing math on one of my talk shows, and it was like the easiest thing. It was 7 plus 7 plus 7 plus 7, and I said 21. I'm great. Honestly. Alright. Back to the show. Alright. Shay Carroll asks, what's the best piece of data that he has personally captured?
Yeah, I had to say, with this new season of Ghost Hunters, we captured this amazing image at Fort Stanton with the electron multiplying camera, which, again, to talk about that again, is that this camera is typically used by the digital imaging scientific community to record photon events. And photon events are light events. They happen all around us all the time in the universe. And some scientists even believe that photons in the universe may retain a consciousness even. But to go a step further, these photon events do carry electromagnetic radiation, which is something that's significant in the paranormal field. So you have so many people out there using EMF detectors and trying to find these EMF fields that could be associated with the manifestation of a ghost or an entity. So over the years, I've consulted many scientists, medical doctors, and engineers. And one thing I always talked about with one of my scientific consultants was, if ghosts are real and they are manifesting, how would they do that? How would that happen? And he suggested to me that it could be through photon events. So we got our hands on a photon camera, the electron multiplying camera. We took it out in the field and we captured some amazing visual evidence that not only you can see for yourself, but gives us a very particular matter with the possibility of these entities manifesting. So it's very exciting. So I'd have to say that the Fort Stanton footage that we collected with the EMCCD camera has got to be one of the top pieces of data.
All right. And then another question from Matt. Finally pronounced it right. Hallelujah. Matt Waddle. What's his favorite urban legend?
Oh, urban legends. That's a tough one too. Oh man, that's one I have to think about a little bit. Thinking about urban legends and whatnot. There's always every location you go to across the country, there's always a Gravity Hill, right? Where there's a story associated with there's always a story about children dying in a bus crash or whatever it may be. And that if you go to a very specific spot and you park your car will start to roll up the hill because these spirits of kids are pushing your car. But it's actually a very natural phenomenon that's taking place. Some of these gravity hills are just an optical illusion to where it looks like you're going uphill, but in all reality, you're actually not going uphill. So your car would move in a manner that looks like you are going up a hill. So I would have to say the gravity hills are a very interesting urban legend.
I have a bunch of favorites, but, with my freaking memory, I like the Japanese ones. Those ones are very interesting. I like the ones that aren't here, if you know what I mean.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, there's a lot of great ones all around the world. So many.
Yeah, the ones here, I'm sorry, they're just boring compared to, all the other ones. All right. So, in your opinion, what is the most scary place that you've ever visited?
Ooh, that's tough too. I mean, scary isn't really something that happens a lot with my investigations. I don't really get scared or have negative experiences like that. But man, I've been to a lot of locations that definitely had a sense of being a little more negative or being a little, scarier, if you will. So, I mean, it's tough. But again, I think this Wednesday's episode at the Colina Marine Hospital, Wednesday at 9 p.m. on A&E, I think that's a location I would say is probably one of the spookier locations I've been to.
All right. And let's see. No comments yet? All right. So, talking about your first thing into this and everything, did your parents support you in it, or were they more I don't think you should do this,
Yeah, they were always supportive of it. Not only because, of their experiences with losing two children, two sons, but they were always open to the idea of there being a life after death and phenomena associated with that. So, yeah, they were always very supportive, extremely supportive, and they're very supportive to this day. They love watching the show. They tune in every Wednesday to watch the show and see what I've been working on and all the advancements we're making in the field. So I've been very lucky to have support from them.
Yeah. So one of the questions from Shay, this is usually Darren's question. I don't know where he's at, but hopefully he will come back. All right. So what's the one object in the whole world he would never want to be haunted?
Oh man, that's tough. One object that I wouldn't want to be haunted. Probably anything in my collection that I have here, which I have a lot of stuff collected. I collect a lot of pieces of history. Like I mentioned before, I like to surround myself with that history every day. So I mean, basically anything that I own. I wouldn't want anything like that in my own personal space or my home. So I'd have to go with any of the antiques that I own in my personal collection.
And talking about your collection, what do you have in there? Is it Civil War stuff, or is it, mixed?
I have all kinds of different stuff, everything from Civil War memorabilia to death culture from the Victorian era, all the way to secret society stuff. So I get a little bit of everything, collect art as well. So anything that's a little bit strange and unusual is the stuff I like to collect. So through all my travels, traveling with ghost hunters in the many years I've been traveling before that, I always stop by antique shops throughout the country and I ask one simple question: what's the weirdest thing you have in here? That's how it usually starts. So I have a little bit of everything, but I just love to surround myself with history and try and relive that history every day.
I don't really have much history stuff except the books. So, hey, at least I got Ghostbusters.
Hey, books are great. Hey, books are great. That's a big part of the learning process, especially with everything we do in everyday life, but especially when it comes down to investigating the paranormal. Very, very, very important.
Yeah. I might not be as cool as you are, but at least I have Ghostbusters surrounding me. And then I also
That's
have
awesome.
Anna.
Ghostbusters is the best.
I know, right? Yeah, I also have Anna back here. She's my haunted doll. So.
Haunted dolls are creepy, that's for sure.
Yeah. She's not creepy, though. She's not haunted in a bad way. I just keep her in here. Because my dogs always run into my room, and I don't want her to get torn up or anything. So
exactly.
This is Anna.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, have you ever been close to Davenport lately, or like, have you never been here?
I think it's been a while since we've been close to that area, but I mean, we're always traveling so much on a consistent basis. It's crazy. I mean, I took so many flights this past year alone. It's hard to keep up with all the locations we've been to, but we've been close to that area many times. So, but it's been a while. The last few cases we worked on before the show started airing, we were in Alaska and as well as Galena, Illinois. So it's we've been bouncing back and forth throughout the entire country.
Yeah. Well, when you do have time to get over here, I have an amazing place that you should come to. This is where I got Anna from. It's this old YMCA. It was a YMCA, and then it turned into a U-Haul that scrapped two of the spiral staircases, sadly. But there's still one. And then it turned into Dan Viner Furniture, and that's what it's called now. It's one of my favorite places, for sure.
Awesome, yeah. Love to check that out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know a lot of the history of that place because I go there a lot. Like, over the summer, it's basically my home away from home. It's like a little boot camp, if you know what I mean.
That's perfect. Like research lab, right? Your own place. That's great.
Yeah, like, I'll just go over there. Hey, David, And David, he comes around here. Same with Mary. A lot of ghosts know me from there, so they just kind of come down and visit.
That's great.
So, which I'm okay with it, as long as I don't do anything bad, jeez.
Of course, no, I get you.
Mess with my dogs. There, mess with my dogs. As long as they do not do that, I'm all good. They can stay. Good. But they do go back there. They go back there whenever I tell them to. So at least they just don't stay here, if you know what I mean. So yeah. All right. So with you being the tech guy, do you ever build any of your own gear to use?
I do not build my own gear. Again, my biggest thing with utilizing certain technology within paranormal research is using tech from other technical industries. And that's not adapted or modified in any way to try and utilize in paranormal research. We want to use factual instrumentation that gives us real data and empirical evidence, not only to further the scientific principle, but also to be able to go to those manufacturers and say, hey, look, we received something we believe to be anomalous. Can you give me any information about it? So that's the biggest thing to me, is not using what we refer to as garage tech so much, but utilizing factual technology to really aid in our data collection and our scientific data collection.
All right. And according to your science, honestly, I like how you just said it, and it just goes out of my freaking mind. Your scientific data, what is the best thing that you've caught?
That's always tough. It's one big thing that's always, what you want to see and should strive for within the paranormal field is correlating data, right? Having something you can explain documented on multiple pieces of equipment. So say you have the electron multiplying camera and you capture something that you can't explain that is a photon event, but at the same time you're using a data logger and you're starting to see environmental changes associated with that anomaly. That's where we start to take it a step further by correlating that evidence, correlating that data, and trying to find that methodology, trying to find that protocol, and understanding that there are changes in the environment when we're starting to see these entities manifest. So that's a big part of it. And anytime that we can correlate different pieces of equipment and different data, that's always a huge win for paranormal research.
All right. So another question from Shay that usually Darren asks, which if he ever comes back to watch this, happy birthday, I heard in the comments. All right, back to the show. Does he believe in psychics?
I do. I think that there are people out there that do have ability. I'm never closed-minded to any type of research. That's something that I would never do. As soon as I'm closed-minded to that type of stuff, I'm starting to make myself biased And that's not a good thing, especially when it comes down to investigating the paranormal. So there's no experts in this field, as we all know. There's no one that is an expert over the other. So I've always been very open-minded to psychic phenomena and people having the ability to not only see but hear and sense what some claim to be spirits. So again, going back to the electron multiplying camera and talking about the idea of photon events being the particular matter associated with the manifestation of ghosts, there are certain people that are alive today that have extra proteins in their eyes that allows them to see photon events in real time. A majority of people out there cannot see photons with their own eyes, but there's a very select few that can. So the next question I have is, are these people that have these extra proteins in their eyes, is that the phenomena they're seeing? Is that why they have this extra ability and are psychic? I think it's something we should definitely look into.
That's really, I'm not sure if this is like the right words, but that is really deep. Like, I've never really thought of that.
Yeah, that's the beauty of trying, taking that step further and having these breakthroughs that we've been having in this last season of Ghost Hunters, these last batch of cases we did, is that we're really starting to see scientific data and real data that can help us understand and further the idea of not only of there being a possible life after death, but there being people out there that do have psychic ability.
Mm-hmm. And have you ever, used psychic on an investigation? And if you have, what's the coolest thing that you have caught?
Yeah, absolutely. I have in the past. With my organization, American Paranormal Research Association, we did a lot of different experiments with psychics and people that have claimed to have ability. And not only have we done that in the form of experiments where we've done seances and whatnot, and trying to observe that type of psychic phenomena, but we've had a lot of times where we've actually documented some kind of unexplained data and something that really supports these people's claims that they do have an ability.
All right. And I think a lot of people have heard this, but do you believe dogs can see ghosts?
I do think that not only animals, but as well as children do have that extra perception. There, in some way, that there's something that they're able to perceive and see that somehow people seem to lose over a period of time. Some keep it, but I definitely think there's something to it. Absolutely.
Yeah, so, weird story, but my dogs, they'll literally look up the stairs and just, glare at it, and then they'll just start barking, and I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna head out. So, not saying that I'm afraid of it, but I'm more like, I don't know who's up there, so they can do their thing, and I'm just gonna stay down here. So, yeah. Alright. So, let's see. Shay asked, what's your biggest fear?
Ooh, biggest fear. That's always another interesting question. At the top of my head, there was a time in my life that I was really afraid of heights, but I kind of got over that the older I've gotten. There was a time I was afraid of flying, even being on an airplane and whatnot, but I've gotten over that as well. So I've conquered a few of my fears, luckily enough. So I'm not sure what I would say is my biggest fear, but I think at one time it definitely was heights, and I think I've overcome that a bit. So I've been lucky to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really hard to overcome fears. My fear sucks because it's bugs and they are everywhere. I can see a stink bug and I would be screaming and running around. True story. I literally saw a stink bug in my room and I ran downstairs. I was like, Dad, go kill it. So yeah, pretty lit. Okay. So Shay asked, what's his favorite experiment?
Oh, it's actually something you're going to see in this new season of Ghost Hunters. The episode after this week, it's a location we do in Wendover, Utah, which was a World War II air base that actually housed the B-29 bombers that dropped the atomic bombs on Japan. That's where they were built, tested, and those planes were a big part of that area, a big part of world history. And we go in there and we actually conduct a very huge piece of paranormal history, something I actually went back and did a lot of research on and found this very specific experiment that took place in the 60s and 70s by some very credible people where they claim that they were able to speak to entities in real time using different frequencies. And I resurrect that paranormal piece of history. We take this schematic that I got my hands on, rebuild that with the modern technology we have now, and we go into a World War II Air Force airfield, and we collect some amazing evidence that I think everyone's going to be really blown away by.
So Matt asks, this might have been answered already, but what's his favorite piece of equipment?
I'd have to say the electron multiplying camera is definitely up there. That or a data logger. The data loggers that we use on the show, you see the EDI pluses, are a huge aspect of our paranormal research, because anytime we can go out there and start to see a correlation of environmental conditions changing within the manifestation of what we believe to be paranormal activity, that's taking it that extra step further with the scientific principle and the scientific aspect. So anytime you can have all of that data recorded to an SD card and be able to cross-reference that, that's always a big win.
Okay, so we're going to play a little game here. It's called Rapid Fire with Natty. But before we do that, because I know that I'm probably going to forget, would you like to shout yourself out on social media or anything?
Sure, yeah. You can find me on all social media at Brandon Alvis. And you can also find all that information on my website, brandonjalvis.com. And all the information you need is there, all my social medias and everything I'm up to these days with Ghost Hunters.
All right. So are you ready? And yes, you are being timed.
Okay, let's do it.
All right. Pizza or tacos?
Tacos.
What is the thing you're most scared of?
I used to be heights, don't have that fear anymore.
Best childhood memory?
Probably visiting Civil War battlefields for the first time.
Twizzlers or Starburst?
Starburst.
Late nights or early mornings?
Both.
Winter or summer?
Summer.
Soda or pop?
Same thing.
SB7 or app?
Neither.
DC or Marvel?
Marvel.
Xbox or PlayStation?
PlayStation.
Dogs or cats?
Dogs.
Action or horror movies?
Horror movies.
What's your favorite ice cream?
Oh, man. Fish food from Ben & Jerry's.
All right, now here's the hardest one. Are there human ghosts underwater?
I think that's very possible. I think that's a very strong possibility.
All right. Your time was 1 minute, 16 seconds, and 37 milliseconds. Yeah, totally.
Is that good? Is that I do well?
Yes, very actually. Freaking Rob took like 15 minutes. He was like, this, and then he did like this whole summary of why. I'm like, I am timing you. Oh my god.
We have a new world record. No, hopefully. Hey, maybe. You never know.
Ta-da! Longest time to take. All right. Well, I'm starting to see the shadow man rounding the corner, telling me that our time is almost over. I would really like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to come on and chatting with myself and my listeners here on Spoopy Talk.
Absolutely. Thank you. It was a pleasure. Always a pleasure to talk about the paranormal, and let's keep up the good fight and find some factual data and find evidence for what we all believe is existing out there.
Mm-hmm. So you have a wonderful night.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So now, for all my listeners out there, I'd really like to say thank you for being with me tonight. My next show will be possibly May 17th with Jonah Jones with Jones Paranormal Research, depending if my softballs start up. I'm not really sure yet, but hopefully, So make sure if you're not following me, give me a follow at Madison Paranormal Investigation on Facebook and Maddie_paranormal_investigation on Instagram. So for tonight, peace, love, and happiness. And most of all, be spoopy, everyone.